Good evening, y'all. How you doing? I'm doing good. Been a busy few days for me. Been cleaning the house and got my nails done. Nice magenta color to match my hair. uh, uh, so yeah, I went and got my nails done today and feel like $1,000,000. And while I was there, um, ran into somebody I knew. So I wanted to talk about that. Um, my dad was amazing. He hurt every day of his life, but never, never let it get him down. He just refused to bow to it and take a lot of medicine to ease the pain because he didn't like being over medicated. So he just dealt with the pain, problems with his back, his polymyositis, all of that. So, he was one of the strongest people I've ever known. And he always made an impression on people. When I was in my last year of high school, my dad decided to get into honeybees. And from that point on, he raised them and got the honey and everything. He would sell his honey to everybody. There was a local restaurant in town called the Log House Restaurant, and they bought a 5-gallon bucket from him every couple months because they used it for their corn fritters. And I mean, he would go to the farmer's market, and he just sold the honey everywhere. So everybody knew my dad. Over the years, my dad had been in the hospital up at Wythe County Community Hospital for surgeries, namely both his knee replacement surgeries. That was in 2010. Now, side note on all this, which is relevant, my mother, before she died, she frickin' sewed. I mean, she could sew anything and everything. I can barely put a fucking button on, but this woman could do anything. And she used to make pajamas for my dad, and it'd be, a button-up shirt and a pair of shorts for summertime, and long pants and shirt sleeve, usually in flannel for wintertime. Well, some of the pajamas that she sewed for him looked like beehives. One of them was yellow and had bees all over it, and there was a couple others that she made that were similar to it, but basically his pajamas were bee pajamas. Bee pajamas for the beekeeper. I know. And Daddy absolutely loved those things. So when he was in the hospital up in town, and when he had his surgeries, of course, he chose to stay in the hospital and do rehab in the hospital rather than getting out early and coming home and trying to do it. So he was in the hospital for a couple weeks each time. And the nurses there, everybody gravitated towards Daddy. Um, he was just that kind of person. He, even after his fall, when he broke his neck, in the hospital up at Lewis Gale, even those nurses just gravitated towards Dad. Anytime they had, you know, a little bit of free time, they would be in Dad's room with him, you know, just talking to him. And he was just that kind of person that everybody loved to be around, especially me. So up in town, when he had his surgeries, he would be in his bee pajamas. And that's how some of the nurses got to know him, was he'd be doing his walking or exercises, and the nurses would see him in his bee pajamas, and they thought those were the coolest ever. And they just gravitated towards Dad. And while I was getting my nails done today, I walked in, and there was a lady already getting her nails done. And she looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place her right off the bat. So I sit down and I choose what color nail polish I want, and I'm waiting for Van to start me for my nails. And the lady looks at me, she was like, "Wasn't your dad the one that wore the bee pajamas?" I was like, "Yep." I'm like, "I remember you from the hospital." She was one of the nurses that would end up taking care of him. And that was, I'm not even sure she remembered his name, but that's how she knew him, was the man with the bee pajamas. And it was that was so fun to run into her like that. She said she is retired from nursing now, and so, you know, while she was getting worked on, and then after that, you know, we just kind of talked and chatted about things, and how great it is to have grandkids and be able to spend time with them. But, you know, when those words came out of her mouth, all I could see was my dad in his bee pajamas walking around. He really just, he always made an impression on people. He was never loud. He was never angry. He didn't talk a whole lot. But when he did talk, there was a lot of wisdom there. He could He could tell some of the funniest stories, and he could help with whatever life had thrown your way, and he could give you good advice. So even though Daddy has been gone for almost 7 years now, people still remember him. And, sometimes that's the best we can ask for when we move on from this life, is that we are remembered fondly and remembered as that good person that we always strive to be. And he was. I learned my work ethic from my dad. I learned a lot from him. He was amazing. God, I miss him every day. There is not a day that goes by when something goes on in my life and my first thought is, I wish I could tell this to Daddy, or I wish I could ask his advice. I wish he was around to be in his great-grandkids' lives. But it just wasn't meant to be, I guess. But it's amazing how people will remember some of the little things, like those damn bee pajamas. Knowing that he is remembered by so many people is a comfort. He touched a lot of people's lives over the years and made their lives better in some way, which is what I strive for. I try to be like my dad, to be memorable for small things, not because I'm grandiose or do outrageous things, but just because I'm me. Daddy got no reward out of this lot of things he did, but he did them anyway because it was the right thing to do. And that endeared him to so many people. There would be people from all over the country that would contact my dad for his honey, because they would have been traveling through this area, stopped at Log House Restaurant, and had some of his honey, and they enjoyed it so much they would contact the people that were working and owned the restaurant. And my dad he told them, if anybody asks, give them my name and number and have them contact me if they want to buy some honey. And he sold honey all over the country. And everybody I knew looked forward to the fall because that's when that's when you start robbing the bees of the honey. And he got a lot. He usually had anywhere from 15 to 25 hives, and one super, which is usually 8 frames, um, it would end up weighing like 60 pounds, and only about 20 of that was the woodwork. So he got a lot of honey. And 9 times out of 10, he sold it. He'd have some put away, of course, for the restaurant, and he'd have some quart and pint jars set aside for other people that also bought from him over the winter time. But by the next spring, he was out. When I moved up here, I had foolish hopes of taking over his bees when he passed. But there's no way I could have. After I moved up here, I did help him and learn from him, but there was no way I would be able to take care of the hives, take care of the honey. There was just no way I would ever be able to do what he did. And then, after he fell, his all but 2 of his hives had died out over the winter time. So when he fell, he did have 2 hives left, but after the fall, they didn't survive either. So he had actually put in an order for starter hives to be delivered to him in the spring. And after his fall, I ended up having to call them and cancel those orders because there was no way any of us was going to be able to do anything with bees that year. I really miss doing those little things with Daddy. The bees, the gardening, having him teach me how to use the tractor. I've got such great memories. Back right before my first wedding, before I got married, I had been working 2 jobs. And the week before my wedding, I stopped working because I needed to get prepared for the wedding, and I wanted my nails to look really nice for the wedding. Instead of just taking it easy and letting things be, instead I went with my dad up the mountain in his old truck, and I was out there using a chainsaw with him, cutting down wood for our wood stove. So I learned how to use a chainsaw from him as well. So uh, the grief is still here, but I am more able to look past the grief to just the good times that I had with Dad. But the grief is still there, and it always will be. I'm just working hard to work through it to get to the other side and hopefully have more good days than bad. It's still a struggle, but I'm doing all right. I miss him terribly, though. I really do. He was one in a trillion, and he's missed not only by his family but by a lot of other people. And it was nice to be able to talk to someone that had known him and that remembered him fondly. So that's my story for the night. Oh, messed up my hair. Oh well. So, all right. Well, my face routine is done. My story's done. I'm going to go ahead and log off, take my meds, and get ready for bed. So, if you've watched this, I thank you. I appreciate you taking time to listen to me rambling. And I hope y'all have a wonderful night. And just remember, I love you. Bye.